Appreciate everyone joining us this morning for Convergent Economic Development Pulse webinar. I'm excited today to be able to talk about the power of placemaking in a marketplace today where so many have the opportunity to work virtually from wherever they want. Uh, Placemaking really is a power for communities. If you are not familiar with Convergent, I'm excited to introduce myself and our firm. I'm Brian Abernathy, the general manager at Convergent, and we are a national leader in fundraising solutions for chambers of commerce, economic developments, and an array of other nonprofits around the country. We have had the opportunity to support hundreds of organizations over the 16 years we've been in business, driving economic and community vitality. And I am really excited today to welcome Jerald Mitchell, President and CEO of Beaten Path, to the webinar to share some perspective. Jerald is a former president and CEO of the Greater Columbus Chamber of Commerce in Georgia, which also operated the Development Authority of Columbus. Before that, he was VP of Economic Development with the Atlanta Beltline, Director of Innovation at the Savannah Economic Development Authority, and Regional Project Manager with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. In addition to that, has served and been engaged with a number of other nonprofits and boards around the state, including some time on the Board of Trustees for Leadership Georgia, which is how Jerald and I got the opportunity to meet back in 2019. So Jerald, welcome. Would love for you to just tell us a little bit about Beaten Path and the way that you help guide organizations and communities through placemaking and placemaking strategy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian, and thanks to everybody that made a little bit of time to join us today. It's really great to be with Brian and Convergent Nonprofit Solutions as they work to, frankly, help communities make themselves better and deliver the dream of vibrancy and economic growth. And it's really important that we do this as it's at the intersection of something that we're so passionate about. I know that I'm passionate about placemaking and have some good experiences to talk to you about again. But the placemaking intersection really includes economic development and long-term community and sometimes private sector value creation. And one of the components that I think gets left out of this equation pretty frequently, and I hope that there's a collective applause for this when I say it, but it's urban planning. Obviously the planners are in the back room doing what they do, but they're an equally important part of how these things come together. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. And again, from a beaten path standpoint, we are a redevelopment firm that's media forward, trying to help communities really take a strategic approach to identifying areas for new economic growth, really identifying and zeroing in on some of those catalysts and how to leverage those catalysts in ways that deliver great future economic growth and vitality. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we proceed. But I'm going to pitch back to Brian to talk about some of the successes that Convergent has experienced.
Yeah, thanks, Gerald. So as you mentioned there, this is transforming a lot of communities. And I think the way that this is thought about has changed a lot since COVID and 2020. A real shift in paradigm of how we've thought about this at Convergent came with our partnership with Fort Madison, Iowa, back in late 2021 and into 2022. We've had a number of projects with economic development groups in Southeast Iowa over the years. And Fort Madison had an array of community leaders that came together and they recognized that their community needed something different to really save and change its trajectory and what was happening. And so they said, we're going to revitalize our marina. It was a $12.7 million project. They brought Convergent in to raise $3 million via a capital campaign to kind of round out the final infusion of capital to make that project happen. They completed this in 2024, and they have recently been named Iowa League of Cities People Choice Award for 2025. That's one of about 5 accolades the community has received since they said we're going to change the marina and our ability to attract and engage folks. And a number that I thought was just fascinating to find, and kind of looking at some of the results of their effort around placemaking. As of July of this year, they were on pace to double their tourism numbers from the year before. That dynamic for a small town on the Mississippi River in southeast Iowa is an economic game changer, right? And so I think this is a great frame of reference to just look at as a starting point for you do this and you do it well with intentionality. Number one, the community can rally around it philosophically and financially. And the long-term impact that that has economically is huge. So, Jerald, I'm really excited that you're going to walk us through how this approach takes place and really kind of the economics behind it, but also the philosophy behind revamping the way a community thinks about the place that they're creating.
Yeah, this is again, first of all, that's a great example. And as I approach these conversations and have approached them in the past, I make sure to tell communities that everybody can do this. This isn't just for big cities. This isn't just for cities that have a river. This isn't just for cities that have an abandoned rail easement that they want to turn into a trail. There's something in nearly every community that you can focus on that can deliver this similar type of placemaking impact and be a catalyst for bigger growth in a node or in an entire community. So one of the things, or I'm going to go through a list of things that um, you should just kind of keep in mind as we have this discussion, but as you uh, approach these conversations in your community, or if you're a private sector entity that's involved in redevelopment or development, think about this as you and your team discuss next investments. But it's what are your necessary needle movers, right? In some instances, for a developer, it is going to be purely financial, but hopefully there's a mission-driven community component that can deliver good results in support of the efforts that community leaders are trying to take on. So you got to think about the needle movers. And from a community standpoint, those things could be talent retention, talent attraction. It could be blight removal. It could be reshaping your tax base. Could be any number of items. But again, you have to know why you would do this. The next scenario that I would encourage you to consider as you advance these types of conversations or discussions is what are available physical catalysts? And those catalysts might not be in existence today. You might have to create them. Again, it could be a retention pond. I know that sounds crazy, but again, it could be a hub of greater development. It could be a park. It could be a historic district or an historic district. It could be any number of existing physical assets that you have in your community that might be underappreciated or overlooked. And I would encourage you to think through those things. And I'll touch on in just or as we get through the latter portions of the event. I'll touch on some more specific ways to think about that. Think about the approach to activation. What are some things that you would want to put into place that become attractive? Things that you put into place that get people to begin to utilize an amenity. There has to be a degree of intentionality around how to draw and attract people as you get through some of these projects or activities. And then the approach to sustainable projects. And when I say sustainable, yes, there's environmental sustainability, but what I'm talking about is longevity from an economic standpoint. How are you going to handle maintenance? How are you going to handle repair? How are you going to handle different things? In many cases, it's pretty easy or straightforward to raise the money or have a campaign that raises money to take on a project or an endeavor. But then what we don't do is, or one of the things that we often miss is what is that long-term operation and maintenance going to look like? So it may not be a part of your campaign, but thoughts should be had, or you should have conversations around, all right, how are we going to continue to keep a staff that's going to keep this thing clean and active and so on and so forth? So again, that should be a big part of your discussion, a big part of the thought process. And the other thing is, I would say this is economic development, but it's so many other things. It is job creation. It can be, again, a new injection of support for tax revenue. It can be a new breath of fresh air for overall property tax values that lead to better value for residents. And again, I've said this in many cases or in many different events when I'm having these conversations. And, if you're a working family that has a couple of children that are ready to go to college and you don't have savings, one of the things that many families do is they look to how they can take out a home equity line of credit so that they can pay some tuition and support their child's college career. And again, you have to have value in your home in order to do that. So it matters. And it doesn't, this is not just for affluent parts of the community. This is something to be considered community wide. So again, those are just some things that I want to make sure to put on the table as we think about behaviors, thought processes around how to digest this information and how to have those conversations in your community. Uh, Next slide. So, as I proceed, I'm going to refer to very specific experiences that I've had over the last nearly 20 years-ish as a part of teams and in many cases leading the efforts that delivered activation and redevelopment tied to mostly infrastructure. And Catalyst, whose advancement solidified stronger senses of place. Um, Again, I've been in economic development for almost 20 years, most notably as the head of economic development for the Atlanta Beltline Inc., held various economic development positions, and been the CEO of a chamber, which is a nonprofit organization, and currently the CEO of Beaten Path. So why placemaking matters? When it's done correctly, um, it's not just about public art or about pop-ups. It's about creating conditions that support sustained economic output for a desired area, right? And if you take a look at this image, what you see is a scenario in Atlanta where on the left you've got a distressed, abandoned, uh, kudzu riddled rail corridor that you don't see any people on it. And if you saw people on it, it would be one of those at your own risk type scenarios, right? Distress corridor, haven for bad things. And again, this is an interesting node because a lot has happened since this photo was taken. But if you look at the picture to the right, it shows the same corridor. And if you see the tower on the left side, and off in the distance, you see that brick building. That brick building on in both photos is Ponce City Market, which was an old back in the 50s and 60s, I believe. It was an old Sears Roebuck distribution center. The Atlanta Beltline is an abandoned rail corridor, and the train used to ride down to that Ponce City Market building, and it would take a spur from the Beltline into that Sears and Roebuck distribution center. And it was when you could buy a house in a box. And again, you see that, we took something that was completely distressed, no real activity, no real significant economic value. And historically, the value would have been the train. But as you see, a train can't even pass this corridor. And really repositioned it as a hub for greater activity, positive activity, and economic growth. So again, I think this is a really good example of how you can re-envision things that are currently in your community somewhat of a nuisance. Um, so if you go to the next slide,
And I'll jump in there, as an Atlanta native, the Beltline effort, it revitalized so much of Metro Atlanta, that the inside the perimeter, as we call it locally, but it catalyzed this perspective on redefining downtown areas that were a little bit neglected, that has, I'd say, trickled, but it's really flooded over into neighboring communities, to where I live, 30 miles northeast of Atlanta, that now our community is talking about bikeways and walkways to be able to connect into the Beltline, so that the outlying areas and suburbs can access that revitalization and the benefit of, jumping on my bike and being able to ride all the way to Ponce City Market. It has really just had significant ripple effects.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And there's a network of similar type infrastructure projects around the country that collaborate and share best practices and that sort of thing. And again, this has just been one of the things as a submarket of Atlanta that has driven some extremely positive outcomes. And it drives to the point that when we invest in places and things that people love, good economics tend to follow. You see higher foot traffic that leads to better property values, it leads to stronger businesses, and in many cases, as you can see in this photo, diversity in housing options as well. Um, this area, so the building in the center of the photo in the back is the same building that you saw in the previous two photos. That's again Ponce City Market, and Ponce City Market sits on top of a natural spring. So this entire node had flooding issues, and it was proposed that the city would do your basic cut and cover drainage program, and that was going to cost about $40 million or something of that nature. And the community and the Beltline and the city and some other stakeholders, they basically came together and had a conversation around this, and they came up with this, right? So this is effectively a stormwater retention project or a drainage project. This feature can accommodate in this node a 500-year flood event. But in addition to that, there was a lot of creativity that was also put into what else this could do. And in building this out as a part of the park that accommodates weddings, receptions, yeah, different types of events, is beautiful. All of the greenery in this park is indigenous or natural. So it can survive drought. It can survive different types of rain events. So again, doing that really added a different level of value to the node, but at its heart, it is a stormwater drainage project. And it unlocked redevelopment for the entire node because it alleviated a problem at Ponce City Market, and it had an impact on insurance rates and other things for the surrounding node, which led to again additional redevelopment. So again, really good option to think about for just creativity and addressing a bigger problem. And again, most people wouldn't even know that this node had those types of issues because what they see is something completely different. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about behavioral economics, and I'm going to start talking about that with an anecdote, and I've shared this with Brian because I think it's so poignant. And this building is next to that Ponce City Market building, or the old Sears and Roebuck Distribution Center. And you can see the belt line as it traverses here, and to the left, behind where this building is, what you would see, because the belt line is supposed to have a transit corridor next to the trail, so they'll have a light streetcar eventually that'll run. But one of the design aspects of this was to keep a part of that corridor that was not used for the trail, overgrown, to use foliage, to use different types of plantings as a buffer that would keep people from using the undeveloped portion of the corridor. And that effectively, served its purpose, and it's still there in many cases around the Atlanta Beltline. But we ran into an interesting paradigm, and I'm not going to use the name of this grocer or this grocery chain. You might see it on the side of that building right there, so I'll let you, use your imagination there. But there was a grocery store that was a one-story grocery store that was right next to, or it was in the place of where you see this mid-rise building, and effectively the grocery chain was between. Or on the other side of Ponce City Market, the Beltline ran between it, and there was the overgrown area between the Beltline and the grocery store. And what we did is when we got done with this segment of the Beltline, we approached the grocer and asked them if they wanted to have an access point from the grocery store to the Beltline. And the grocery chain declined because their impression at the time was that 90% of their traffic into the store came from their parking lot, that people drove there. Well, we put out trail counters, and those counters helped us tremendously in terms of giving us the information that effectively 70% of the grocery chain's traffic was coming from the Beltline, not from the parking lot. And when we took that data back to the grocery chain, they said, "Where do I sign for this access point?" Again, it was a real anecdote in what we saw. And you'll see what I did here. But at the end of the day, what happened is consumers beat their own path between the Atlanta Beltline and between that grocery store. And the real behavioral lesson here is that people will tell you what they want and what they need. And what we're guilty of as leaders and as economic developers and as chambers and city council members and, you know, the list goes on and on. What we're guilty of is sometimes ignoring what people are telling us. And in this case, there was because we had the data and because we were observing the human behavior, we were able to take back good anecdotes, good reasonable rationale that led to a better outcome for everybody involved. And again, I want to go a little bit deeper on behavioral economics because it's about understanding how people actually behave instead of making assumptions in communities that drives that instead it drives. We want to drive data that speaks to actual human movement, gathering, and how they spend. Uh, when people cut through, a grassy area, like we just explained, or they cut through a parking lot, or do something else that is, unexpected or what we might deem as unnecessary behavior, we need to take a step back because they're telling us something, right? They're telling us something about what's more convenient for them in terms of the way they traverse. And I'll give you another anecdote before I move to the next example. But when in most communities, probably in your community as well, you look at, for instance, an industrial park that is operated probably by your development authority. And I think every one of us can reflect on scenarios where we've gone to an industrial park because we were going to have a prospect or client visit in a few days, and you get to the industrial park, and what you see is that somebody's disposed of a mattress or a couch or a broken table or some piece of junk in the industrial park. And what we do is we go back to the office and say, "I can't believe people are dumping at our industrial park." And we call the city, and the city or county, they go out, take the trucks and they clean it all up before the economic development prospect gets to the industrial park. Well, we saw this happen enough that we decided to do some digging and understand human behavior here. And what we learned was that if they had left that mattress or that couch or that distressed table or whatever other garbage, tires, whatever it is, if they had left that at their home or at their business, they would have been charged to do it. So what they do is they load it on a truck, get a friend's truck, load it up, take it to the industrial park, throw it out, and then it gets picked up for free. So what they're saying to us that sometimes we have a hard time hearing is we're not going to pay your additional fee to do this. So again, not telling people what to do, but my thought would be, hey, if this means that you increase everybody's sanitation bill by 25 cents to cover these occurrences, you're still getting paid for it, but the barrier for people thinking that there's a separate charge goes away, and maybe you're able to mitigate some of the occurrences of having that type of blight in your community in places that are certainly unwanted. So again, just another example of the behavioral economic development. If you'll go to the next one. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about another scenario. If you're thinking that I just gave examples of kind of big city and you're not in the big city, so this might not be as compatible with what you're working through. I want to offer another example, and that's Columbus, Georgia. And there are a couple of examples. One is going to be what happened with Riverfront Place. The other is going to be what happened with Golden Park. It's a historic baseball field or stadium in Columbus, Georgia. Uh, just understand, and I know you do because you're on this call, redevelopment, well done, can develop a positive community identity. For those who want to see a smaller example, here is one. And again, I look at Columbus, and this is an example on the left of the Chattahoochee River in Columbus, Georgia. There were a series of dams that lined the river, making the river, frankly, impassable, unusable. And they were there for good reason. Columbus used to be a mill town. The river was lined with mills all up and down the river. And as time went on, as you might imagine, textile and grist mills and those sorts of things went away. They weren't needed, they weren't necessary. So the riverfront in Columbus, Georgia became pretty distressed and blighted. John Turner and some other folks in Columbus had the idea to turn this dam-riddled Chattahoochee River component or section into what you see on the right, which is the country's longest urban whitewater course. So now, instead of this being a dam that powers, or a series of dams that powers mills that are no longer existent, this is a whitewater course that lends itself to different types of activity and tourism. Columbus experienced the International Canoeing Federation's national or World Kayaking Championships a couple of years ago as a result of having this amenity. And again, because they worked out this infrastructure challenge or issue, it then gave way to better development on the riverfront of Columbus. Next slide. Here we go. This is good. So this doesn't do it justice because this building is the Rapids. It's an apartment building. Behind it is the Eagle and Phoenix, which is an old historic mill that was turned into loft condominiums. And then to the left of this, and I'm talking about the picture on the right, but to the left of it is a hotel. Well, there's a Pocket Park and there's a Hotel Indigo, and Synovus's new headquarters is behind it. And then there's another high-end apartment complex called the Currents. So again, all of this was just an empty, vacant, blighted, distressed area in Columbus, Georgia. And because W.C. Bradley owned a lot of this property, they took the lead in making this stuff, working with others to make this stuff produce again. So again, businesses, ground floor retail, office buildings, headquarters, hotels to support tourism and some of the corporate clienteles that visit. So again, a lot of different things. And again, this Pocket Park is amazing for different types of press conferences, events, concerts, those sorts of things. So again, that's a great example of how you take something that is just not producing and bring it back into a much more productive state of existence that delivers community value and benefit. Next slide. So here I want to point out a recent development. So now the Atlanta Braves had, and I hope nobody's on the call that has hurt feelings about the Pearl, Mississippi Braves, but the Double A affiliate for the Atlanta Braves was the only affiliate of the Braves that was not in Georgia. And because of Columbus's forward thinking and desire to continue to reshape itself or reposition itself and have redevelopment as one of the community identities, a group came together, and I had fun working with this team, but a group came together and effectively um, took this picture on the top left, which is an old rickety historic baseball stadium called Golden Park, and did a $50 million redevelopment project on it that helped us attract the Double A Braves minor league affiliate called the Columbus Clingstones. And I'll sidebar, a clingstone does have relevance to Georgia. A clingstone is a type of peach. And I know that people say clingstones are not grown in Georgia, they're grown in California, but that is also not correct. Clingstones were grown in Georgia in the 17 and 1800s. So there's a little bit of history there I wanted to provide for everybody about the Columbus Clingstones and why that name is relevant. But as you see here, that rehab project really changed the way this amenity in the community um, uh, has relevance and brings people together. In the older stadium, people didn't want to do this. People didn't want to go here. The city had gained and lost affiliates, and the reason they lost them was because of the lack of support. And now there's an amenity that everybody's proud of, and there's a bigger node around this of about 170 acres that is also going to be redeveloped as a part of a broader scenario that should develop or derive an enormous amount of value for the community from a tax standpoint and jobs and workforce development. And again, centered around this one catalyst. And this is on the river, by the way. You can't see the river, but it's behind that line where you see the fireworks happening. The river runs right through that. So again, really neat amenity that Columbus has. And again, a great example of how it doesn't have to be a major metropolitan area like Atlanta for you to do something meaningful.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll chime in there, Gerald. We talked about this example a couple of weeks ago. The leverage of the minor league baseball field, particularly, is one that we have seen in so many communities become a cornerstone for catalyzing this other development. You've got natural resources like river. You've got
yeah.
call it worn out infrastructure like the Beltway, right, that create these opportunities. But North Augusta, South Carolina comes to mind.
Yep.
Greensboro, North Carolina, and the Grasshoppers comes to mind. High Point, right down the road in North Carolina, did this. We were working in Spokane, Washington a few years ago, and they were talking about revitalizing a major league ball club opportunity. These, call them entertainment infrastructure.
Yep.
There can be gyms there that even if you're not a baseball fan, you go into these areas of these communities and it has changed your entertainment and engagement value on so many levels beyond just catching a game on a spring night.
Yeah, that's right. And a great example of that is what the Texas Rangers did in Houston, or not, they're not in Houston. What the Texas Rangers did with their stadium and what the Atlanta Braves did with the Battery. Frankly, I think more people go to hang out at the Battery than they do to go watch baseball. And again, it's just derived in an important economic value and benefit to Cobb County and Atlanta. And as Brian could probably co-sign on, there are a lot of county commission people who were involved in the onset of this that probably lost their council seats or their commission seats. These things take leadership and they're not easy depending on the mindset of the community. And sometimes people have to be convinced. Again, that's just a part of this. Hopefully, you're all in communities that, um, you've got really good hooks and you do normal community engagement and you have high degrees of trust that are already built up between the community and its leadership, and those things lead to great outcomes. But again, this is not this is fun. It's exciting. It delivers value for those interested in it. It helps create legacy. But I will also caution that it is not for the faint of heart.
I remember working in a community several years ago and meeting with a council member, and she referred to the cane people, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that." And she said, "Yeah, the citizens against nearly everything."
Yeah.
There's always some folks who are going to naysay, right? It's that
Yep.
vision of leadership to look beyond that and say, "Hey, we can decide to make the most out of the opportunity ahead of us, or we can listen to all the people that say there's nothing there."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And again, these are all demonstrations that economic development and good economics follow behavioral development. Again, sometimes we have to change the behavior, but more often we have to find ways to listen to it.
Yep.
Next slide. So again, I'm going to get into this in just a second. These are some other anecdotes. And by the way, the Atlanta Beltline is very picky about their logo. The logo police would have my head for this because they have recently changed their logo, but this was the only image I could find that showed the before and after of this. But again, I want to reiterate, Beaten Path is media forward redevelopment and placemaking strategy company, right? We're really working to decode what I call the human signal, right? And in doing so, help communities, quasi-governmental entities, and private developers figure out what to redevelop or build by evaluating what people are already doing and are likely to continue to do. And again, these are messages that people give us on a regular basis. We just have to get better and better and better at listening. This is a small thing we did, and it didn't take a ton of money, but we had some money and we put it into a facade partnership, which is a facade improvement program, but it was centered around art. We worked with engineers to make sure that any structure that applied for these dollars, that it was structurally sound. And then we partnered with artists to do artistic facade renovations to those facilities. So as you see here, basic on the top, basic strip mall. It's not even the beer garden yet. So that's an idea of what it looked like before. And then on the bottom, we basically did this, or the artist developed this kind of neon lighting scheme that made the building look much more appealing, addressed art on the inside and some of the seating. Next slide. And here's another one that we did with a company called Bearings Bikes, where again, basic kind of bland building. We were able to again make sure it was structurally sound, make the awning color a little bit darker, do some artistic bikes on that wall there from an artistic standpoint, and just do some things to spruce this thing up to make it more appealing, give it curb appeal. And we did a handful of others, but again, this was not expensive. All we needed to do is sign a contract with an engineer again to make sure anything the artists were going to work on was structurally sound, and then making sure that we had a good procurement process set up so that we could identify artists. And as we all know, artists are artists and not business people. So we had to make sure that one, the artists were paid, but two, we had to make sure that we had schedules and different sorts of things to make sure this stuff was delivered on time, and good panels, frankly, of community members who knew as a part of the Beltline art program, how to evaluate artists that were viable for us to work with. So again, there's just some interesting anecdotes about other ways to engage. Next slide.
Yeah, so this is all phenomenal perspective, Jerald. What happens next, right? That's the question probably of every economic developer and every or council member, whoever around the United States thinking about the opportunities or what they might be in their market. So, number one, for everybody on the webinar, the Q&A is open. Please drop in questions there. But we've got some initial questions that we identified early on of what are people going to want to or need to know to move towards implementing this type of perspective. So, where do you start?
Yeah, so I think the where you start is you got to understand why, and you got to identify the challenge. Some people would call it a problem that your community faces. Is your problem leakage of talent? Is it leakage of tax revenue? Is it that you have flooding issues? Is it that you have traffic issues? You have to start by really being honest with yourself as a community about some of the challenges that you can address, and then being creative about ways that you can take those things head on, but not in a way that becomes contentious or offensive, so that you lose support. So again, I think that that's a really big part of this. Sometimes people just say, "Well, we want a trail." Well, okay, is that really the best way to spend your money? The Beltline is so successful, in my opinion, because it's comprehensive, right? They're trying to address some housing issues. They're trying to address some jobs issues. They're trying to address environmental mitigation and remediation because that entire rail corridor was a brownfield. Because as you might imagine, the trains, historically would transport chemicals and other materials for manufacturing processes. So there's a lot of issues there, or were a lot of issues there that have been addressed by the project. And Clyde and the team over there do a fantastic job of keeping this thing moving. But again, be honest with yourself about what those issues are. And you don't want to build a trail just to have something botanical, right? There are segments of the Beltline that are single family residential. There are segments that are multifamily housing. There are segments that are botanical. There are segments that are very commercial. You can have all of those things. And the reason why I would argue, yes, you should, if you want something botanical, build something botanical. But the reason I'll argue against that is because I'm thinking about return on investment for the taxpayer or for the community. The reason you want to add your coffee shop or your sandwich shop or your restaurant or whatever the case might be to this overall scenario is because it helps you explain that there is some sort of return, because you're doing something to enhance or address values, job creation, or something tangible that you can quantify and take back to the people that support you. So I'll stop there in terms of where the community should start.
Well, we didn't tee that up, but that return on investment perspective is your baseline to go out and secure private sector and philanthropic support, right? If municipal budget, whatever else it is, can't fund it, showing that ROI is how we were able to go raise the last $3 million to wrap up Fort Madison Marina. And they're seeing the upside of that ROI today, right? Nearly doubling, on pace to double their tourism. It's paying off, right? So the ROI is huge. For economic developers and other leaders, you talked about the behavioral economics. I love the grocery store example. Almost said the name. Um, what is the way to identify those catalysts that you've got?
Yeah, so again, I go back to that, looking at the issue in Columbus where you've got all these dams that are lining up the river, and there's no real use for the power that's generated. And again, I guess you can never have enough power, especially with what's happening with artificial intelligence. But again, that was an infrastructure project and led to support for stormwater drainage because there is a riverfront trail. It's called the Dragonfly Trail that runs right next to that river. So again, that was because when there were massive storm events, the water would rise and go basically into the city. So again, that started as an infrastructure project as well. And again, I would encourage as economic developers or community leaders try to identify powerful catalysts, look for how you can identify a problem that can be unlocked through infrastructure. Okay, so again, you have to figure out flooding in a particular node. You have to figure out, ingress and egress. You have to figure out how to unlock an underperforming or distressed, dilapidated former mall or whatever the case might be. So identify that, and then put on the creative hat or bring creatives into the room and let them throw spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks in terms of concepts, ideas. What could this be? What should this have been in the first place? Different things of that nature. And it's really interesting that process of ideation that helps you get to something that people are sitting in the room and they say, huh, I like that. That is one of the most powerful moments that you can have as you're, talking to various stakeholders about how to do this.
And I love that point in there, Jerald, that if you look to your biggest problems or issues as your biggest areas of opportunity, you get double the benefit. You get to address that thing that's probably frustrating people and then turn it into something so valuable and appreciated they forget there was ever frustration in the first place. Uh,
Yep.
a great comment we got in the Q&A from Robert. Just want to call this out, that recognition and appreciation that the artist, the design, that perspective is a critical business value in all of this. Certainly want to recognize the role that that plays
Yeah.
across that you've noted, as well as many other communities. So thanks for that point, Robert.
Yep.
Completely. All right. How do we get people together, right? Getting folks around the table. Who's at the head of the parade? Maybe who wants to be is not who needs to be. There's some politics and convening dynamics that come up. How do communities position uh, to work through that? Or should somebody just jump out and do it all on their own?
Yeah, never do it on your own. Never ever do it on your own. Look, I get it, and like I said earlier, this is hard stuff, right? It's fun, but it's hard, and not rocket science, but it's hard. And what I say is, who needs to be around the table? The first thing you should do as you identify who needs to be around the table is and I'll use this word and I use it loosely and lovingly, but identify the different factions in your community. In some communities, you have military, you have obviously your political scenario. Sometimes you have business elite, and then you'll have small business people, and then you'll have, maybe your community has a powerful clergy. So again, I would say identify factions. And then identify, the folks that you think are going to have the creative and technical capacity to help move a project or an initiative forward. And again, I would caution you not to make that too big too early, because when you bring in too many people that don't have a basis for what it is that you're trying to do, what happens is you end up with more questions than you have answers extremely early, and that can put you in a position or a posture of losing support before you even got to a point of understanding what it is that you're going to do. So don't make it too big too fast, but you have to identify those factions, and then you have to identify the people that can help you do it. And then thirdly, you have to identify people that can have the biggest impact for whisper campaigns around the community that can help you achieve success and make sure that you don't step on some of those landmines.
I love that whisper campaign perspective.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Yep. You got to have it.
yeah. Um, Last one, I would imagine there's an array of different perspectives on this, but idea to impact. How do we get from recognizing that thing that could be our catalyst in a community to moving forward to get to realize the value that it could create?
Yeah, so I think that this is one of the really important questions in this entire discussion because as we all know, we've all seen scenarios where the hard work of coming up with a really good project happens and then it sits on the shelf. right? Never ever gets done for whatever reason. People are, perceive that there's not enough money. The wrong stakeholder or the right stakeholder doesn't like it. There's a lot of different things that can happen to have an impact on that. So as you go through the process of ideation, I think you have to make sure that you are segmenting phases of your project and clearly communicating phases of the project. And I think that's where, once you've done some amount of the ideation and understanding of what could be, I think that's when you bring in a third party that has experience and frankly, the ability to bring the right folks to the table that can help execute understanding community engagement and communication as big parts of that. But again, I think that that's when you bring the experts in. The experts can add a different level of structure, but in addition to adding the structure, they can work through things like what Brian does on a daily basis, figuring out, how to cover costs or how to gain leverage with existing funds. They can figure out which engineering firms have a specific expertise, which architectural and design firms have the specific types of expertise depending on the project you're taking on, and just really lead you to a point of, at the end of the day, it's packaged. Now the trigger is getting pulled, and whether or not that trigger gets pulled or not is on you. So that's where, it takes a lot to get to that point. But again, you have to have a nucleus or a nuclear group in the community, and then have that professional support that can help you further develop structure and package, and then getting to a point where it's ready for a community or private sector green light.
Yeah, it's great. It's a process, right? I think that's the important
Yep.
thing to remember is it's a process, and the right people, the right order of operations make all the difference. Um, Jerald, really grateful to have you join us today. Thanks so much for sharing your experience and perspective. I've got your contact info here on the screen for anybody that's got follow-up questions. If there's a community out there trying to figure out what their next steps are, just really quickly here in closing, tell us a little bit about how Beaten Path can step in and help them move forward to reapproach placemaking in their community.
Yeah, again, thank you so much, Brian, for the opportunity. And thanks to all of you for taking some time today to join us and talk about this. I'm really passionate about it. If you're trying to figure out where to go, how to do it, I'm happy to come out, have conversations with you about it. We're also happy to really work through the component of this that happens before development occurs, right? Thinking about that human signal, thinking about, how to quantify what's happening. Sometimes we'll see a blighted or distressed building that might have homelessness around it, or it might have kids playing around it after school every day, or whatever the case might be. And we just drive by it every day and say, that's just a nothing building. It'll never amount to anything, that sort of thing. Well, maybe, maybe not. Let's put some data around it. Let's look at, some of the other trends. Let's look at what's happening in the surrounding node and make some decisions about whether or not this is a good target for some catalytic redevelopment and placemaking. So again, that's the approach we want to take. We will take. I'm happy to come out to do speaking engagements. I'm happy to come out to help with again just kind of that early process of structure and ideation as well. So it's been a pleasure to do this for Convergent and for all of you. And I hope to be in communication soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Jerald. Everyone, thanks for joining. And have a great day. Look forward to getting to connect with you on our next Economic Development Pulse webinar.
Thank you all.